We're going to continue the second part of the class. Now it's turning into a series about the Erev Rav. And I don't want to do too long of a recap from last class. If you didn't see it, go and look at it. It's very important. But very, very short recap. We're talking about a group of people that are called Erev Rav. And not all of them are actually people, but we'll call now a group of beings or individuals, peoples, and so forth that are called Erev Rav. The translation of Erev Rav is great mixed multitude, which I don't like that translation at all. And then we started explaining the root of the Erev Rav, where it started after the flood. We'll have to do another class for that. I don't think we're going to make it today. And then how Moshe Rabbeinu thought he was going to be able to take the Erev Rav and convert them and bring them into the under the wings of the Shekhinah, which he was wrong. Of course, they did the golden calf, the Egel HaZahav, and then he had the responsibility to go and extract the godly spark out of the Klippah. And that's one of the reasons why he was not able to go into the land of Israel, because he had to stay in exile with the Shekhinah, with the holy sparks that got stuck in the Erev Rav, and to release it from them. Needless to say that with that we understand that the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu is going to be a part, or a big part of the whole soul of Mashiach, who's the only one that's going to be able to completely destroy the Erev Rav, especially Amalek. And I explained that there are 5 groups of the Erev Rav. Amalek can only be destroyed. Amalek cannot be converted or to do tshuva. But the other 4 groups can be fixed. And more than that, which is important to know, is that the redemption cannot come as long as Amalek exists. Which means that Amalek has to be destroyed, then the redemption can come. But with the other 4 groups, the redemption can come first, and then they can be destroyed or rectified. But the other way around, it doesn't work. Which means that we have to destroy Amalek in order for the redemption to come. Can we destroy Amalek? That I'm not too sure. You have a question about Amalek?
Yes. Who do we say today is Amalek?
So that's why you're here, to learn who is Amalek. So now, first of all, I'm not going to point my fingers on too many people, because that's what get people killed. But the point of this little, start as a class, but I think it's going to turn into a series, is to recognize who's Amalek. Who's Amalek, and then, forget about who's Amalek, who's the Erev Rav. Because Amalek is one of 5 groups of the Erev Rav. First, I need to understand who they are. Then I need to understand if I need to prevent myself from any friction with this individual, or if I have any way of doing something. Which the bottom line, besides learning the topic, which is very interesting, is the whole point of everything that we learn is what is the tachlis, what am I doing? So in this case, either I need to know who to be aware of, and then of course, what can I do? How can I don't know if to say coexist, but how can I live knowing who's the Erev Rav? And in many cases, you're not going to even know, because we were explaining last class that a lot of good souls are trapped in the Klippah, and they are controlled by the Erev Rav, and they're behaving like an Erev Rav. And you can go to the Knesset in Yerushalayim and find a lot of them, but it doesn't mean all of them are Erev Rav. There's no question here that all the MKs in the, a lot of people are not going to like what I'm saying, but most, I'll be conservative, most of the Knesset in Israel is Erev Rav. The question is, some of them are Erev Rav that have to be completely killed, like an Amalek, and some of them are good souls that are trapped in the Klippah and are operating like an Erev Rav. But I think what we should do first today is go through the 5 groups, learn a little bit more. I hope we can go through the 5 groups. I can't even see the time, but go through the 5 groups if we can make it today. If not, then we'll break it into 2 classes. Then we're going to have to learn about the entire generation of generation of dispersion, Dora Falaga, which are a big part of it, because we're going to learn today about the Nephilim, and then we can draw conclusions. And we're not going to get a whole list of who exactly is the Erev Rav, but if you have a guidelines, then you can kind of put the dots together. And really, it's not really our job to find who they are and to destroy them. I think in this point is for us just to weaken the Erev Rav. And the way to weaken Erev Rav is only with the light of the Torah. So when we increase light and goodness and kindness in the world, by default, the Erev Rav weakens. The destruction of Amalek, that's going to have to be done with Mashiach. He is going to have the power to do it. We cannot do it. And the rest of the Erev Rav, mainly Mashiach, is going to have to destroy them all. But without further ado, before we continue, just again, so the quick recap that we said is that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to have to destroy it. Amalek is part of the Erev Rav, and he has to be destroyed prior to the coming of the redemption. And what else we were talking last week?
Where does that come from? That it has to be destroyed before the redemption?
This is all from the Zohar. We're reading from the Akdamat Zohar. If you remember last class, I said this is usually when we learn from the Zohar is from the Zohar on the parasha. Then there's Tikkunei Zohar, and then there's another part of the Zohar that is called Hakdamat Zohar. Hakdama is like an introduction, or we'll call it an introduction. Not really an introduction, but it happens to be that we're reading from Hakdamat Zohar on the book of Bereshit. We're in page Kafei 25, in 25a, and everything that we're reading is from the Zohar. So it's not brought from a different idea. We're only following from the Zohar. I think at the end classes, when I want to talk more about the Dor HaPalaga, the generation of dispersion, or the generation of the Tower of Babylon, then we're going to have to bring out some other books and the Talmud, because it's very interesting to see the connection. But right now we're reading directly from the Zohar. So if I missed something in the introduction or the recap, better to go see the other class. It's not long. It's only 3.5 hours. You'll knock it out no time. No, it was an hour and 20 minutes. It wasn't so long. It's on YouTube. Somebody wrote on the comments of YouTube, watch the video fast before the Erev Rav takes it down. So, so we'll see how long it will stay there. So, okay. So now with that said, where did we stop? And very important that we were talking, and again, just to recap, we were talking a lot about the war of Amalek, how the war of Hashem, Mashiach is going to have to destroy Amalek. Amalek is a big part of it. So with that said, let's go through the 5 groups. I'll try to squeeze all 5. If not, forgive me, and we'll do 3 and 2, or 2 and 3. We'll see how it goes. Okay, next. So if you want to follow, Hakdamat Zohar, Book of Bereshit, page 25a, and the line starts with the word V'chamesh minim inun be'erev Rav. There are 5 types of Erev Rav. Here he says minin. A min is like a klipa. So a very quick explanation. Klipa, the translation is a husk or a peel. Now in general, a klipa is a negative thing. It's a negative force, a negative energy, an entity. But essentially it was created to cover over Kedusha and to guard it. That's why the klipa was created. Hashem didn't have the intention to make the klipa evil. The klipa, like a peel, is coming to cover the godly sparks so they will be protected. The Zohar says that, gives a parable, that there was once a king and he wanted to see if his son is worthy to be the next king, and he wanted to see how strong the son is. So he hired a woman who gives services, or to say it in a simple word, a prostitute. He hired her to go and to seduce the son and to see if the son is going to be strong and brush her off or jump on the opportunity. And he gave her a very nice amount of money. Of course, the lady didn't want to perform such a job. She was like, I'm going to be responsible now, making the son sin, the next king, the prince. But I have an order from the king. I have to do it. If I won't do it, that's going against the king. So she found a bold idea. She was like, you know what? I'll hire another girl and let her do it. So she came to the next woman and said, you see this guy over there? Here's a large amount of money. Go and seduce him and try to make him fail. By the way, that's the son of the king. So she didn't want to do that, so she went and hired another woman, and she went and hired another woman. Before you know it, the 20th woman on the 20th generation took the job gladly and didn't even know that that's the son of the king. And that's really what was going on with the klippah. Hashem created the klippah, a spiritual energy that is hard and coarse, to cover a godly spark, to protect it. But with the generation, and we'll use a harsh word, the evolution of the klippah, it went and became worse and worse and worse, that it works against Kedusha, not knowing who created it. So the klippah is an evil entity, not knowing that it's created by the master of the universe, and it's full force, negative and evil against Kedusha. Kedusha means holiness. So now the Zohar says there are 5 types of klippot. Now, again, and I'm going to say it as a side note, because if you learn Hasidic philosophy, there are more klippot. The Hasidut explains that there are 7 klippot. This is different klippot that it's talking about. And I'm going to keep using the word klippah, because Hasidut explained that the 7 nations correspond to the 7 klippot, and then there's an 8th klippah called Klippat Midyan. This is if you learn Hasidut. We're learning Hasidut right now. We're learning Zohar. The Zohar is referring to these 5 klippot. And he says as follows: Chamisha minei klipot hem. There are 5 types of the klipot. Hame'oravot ba'erev Rav, that are mixed in the Erev Rav. Okay, that's why the Torah translates it as a great mixed multitude, because it's all mixed together. Then it says, Shemilvad klipat Amalek. There's one klippah that is called Amalek, which again, if we're going by teachings of Hasidut, that's one of the nations, Klippat Amalek. So he says, besides Klippat Amalek, yeshod arba minei Erev Rav. So we have Amalek is one type, and then we have another 4. Ve'inun siman. How do we categorize them? He gives us a siman, he gives us a sign, and he calls it nega ra. Nega is like on the skin. There's a tzarat, that's a nega. And Ra is evil. But why the sign is Nega Ra? Because Nega is written Nun, Gimel, Ain, and then Ra is written Reish, Ain. That's the acronym of Nephilim, Giborim, Anakim, Refaim, Amalekim. These are the 5 klippot. And if you don't have the book in front of you, maybe for the editing we'll put it on the screen. But the Nun of Nega is Nephilim, that's the first group. The Gimel of Nega is Giborim. The Ain of Nega is Anakim. Then you have the Reish, Refaim, and the Ain is Amalekim. The 5 groups of the Erev Rav. Uveginayu, and because of them, Nafla Hei Ze'ira Mi'atraha, the small hay, we explained that in the previous class, the small hay of Yud Kei Vav Kei, small hay means the last hay. Because of them, the small hay of Yud Kei Vav Kei fell down from its place into exile. That's why the name of Hashem is not complete in the world. So we can feel the holiness of Hashem, we can experience it, we can benefit full force. As we say when we pray, Bayom Ahu Yeh Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. Because right now his name is separated, Yud Kei Vav Kei of course, but in that day, when Mashiach is going to come and destroy the Erev Rav, then the name of Hashem will be joined together. V'ra'u chol basar et Shem Hashem. Everybody will see the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, v'niglach vod havaya, and the honor and the presence of Hashem will be revealed in the world. And Bezrat Hashem, that's going to be a great day. But since then, till then, the letter Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei is in exile. And he says, Bil'am uvalak. These are 2 individuals that we're going to learn on them next week. Bilam was a sorcerer and Balak was another one. Both were dealing with magic and sorcery. And they, of course, wanted to destroy the nation of Israel. So he says, Balaam and Bilak both come from Amalek. And the text says, Balaam uvalak misitra de Amalek havu. They are rooted in the klippah of Amalek. How do we know that they are rooted? So he says, I'll give you a sign. Tol am min Bilam, lak min Balak. Take the word Bilam and take the Ain and the Mem of Bilam out, put it aside. Take the word of Balak and take the Lamed and the Kuf out of Balak. Now take the Lamed and the Kuf of Balak and the Ain and Mem of Bilam and put them together and you get Amalek. You see how he did it? I'll say it again. You take the word Bilam, cut it in half, take the Ain and the Mem of Bilam, put that Ain and Mem aside. That's the Aleph and Mem of Amalek. And take from Balak the Lamed and the Kuf, remove it aside, take the Lamed and the Kuf and add that to the Ain and Mem of Bilam, and then you have Amalek. Okay, so Bilam and Balak came from Amalek. Shehem otiyot Amalek anirbazot bishmam, the letters of Amalek who are hinted in their name. Lomar, to tell you, ki klipat Amalek, the klipa of Amalek, reshit goim. That's the head of everything. So Amalek is the first of the Erev Rav. And more than that, Ba'u lilachem imam im Yisrael betzetam miMitzrayim. Amalek came to fight the nation of Israel when they came out of Mitzrayim. Even though they all existed prior, but the story now with Balak and Bilam didn't happen right away. But right when they came out of Mitzrayim, Amalek came to fight the nation of Israel. Just imagine the chutzpah, and knowing that Hashem is on their side, they just defeated the Egyptian army. Can you imagine defeating the Egyptians? It's almost like saying that Israel will defeat the Russian army and then Hamas will come and fight them. Are you out of your mind? This is like the strongest army in the world and you, a bunch of hoodlums, are coming to fight us? That's kind of the same thing. Israel went out of Mitzrayim and then Amalek comes and fight them. Even though we read last parasha that the Ma'apilim went and fought Amalek and they were destroyed. But nevertheless, the Klippa of Amalek that came to fight the nation of Israel when they went out of Egypt, it continued over on Balak and Bilam. ולכן רצו להכחיד את שם ישראל. Therefore, Balak and Bilam wanted to destroy the nation of Israel. So we're going to read next week in the parasha that Balak saw the nation of Israel coming forward. They were afraid. They went to Bilam and made a pact with them and go and curse them. But nevertheless, this comes from prior engagement and they wanted to destroy the nation. Ishtar, now the letters of Bilam, the Bet and the Lamed of Bilam, and the letter Bet of Balak, then if you put them together, you get another word. Because if you remember, we took the Ain and the Mem of Amalek, of Bilam, and the Lamed and the Kuf of Balak, so we made Amalek. But now take the rest of the letters and put it together. So you take the Bet and the Lamed of Bilam, and the Bet that is left from Balak, what do you get? Bavel. Babylon. But not the Babylon that came 1,500 years later. We're talking about the time of Nimrod and the generation of dispersion. When I told you it all started there, a lot of people, even on the last video, commented, why are you saying the Freemasons are all the way back to Babylon? That's not true. Well, it is true. It all started there. That's where everything starts. So when it's talking about the Bavel, you see already how it's rooted, how Amalek is already rooted all the way back at the generation of the Tower of Babylon, or what is called Dora Falaga, the generation of dispersion. Shesham banu Dora Falaga et Amigdal. At that time, why Bavel? What's so significant about Bavel? And I'm not talking about the Bavel of Nebuchadnezzar, that after the destruction of the temple, we went out to Bavel and later on stayed there for hundreds of years. We're talking about the Bavel at the time of the generation of dispersion, that they built a tower. ורצו להילחם עם יוצרם. They built a tower to fight the Creator, to fight Hashem. ונקרא שם המקום בבל, and the place is called Bavel, or Babylon. Why? כי שם בלל השם שפת כל הארץ. Because Balal means to mix, and that's where Hashem mixed all the languages of everybody. And it's actually, they had one language. He mixed their languages, and he made one big salad out of everybody. ורצה לומר, saying in other words, ששורש טומאת בלק ובלעם, the root, we just spoke now before in the class of Gates of Reincarnation, everything is rooted somewhere. So the root of Balak and Bil'am, היה גם מבני דור ההפלגה. It goes all the way back to the people from the time of the generation of the Tower of Babylon. And that's very important to know, because the Erev Rav, that's where it starts. Even though, if you were here in the last class, I told you that the root goes to the worlds prior to this world. Remember we learned about that? And I told you there were 984 generations, 7 kings. Remember that? So the root is going all the way back. That's why the result is that they can only be destroyed. They cannot do tshuva. But going back to the root of Balak and Bilam, it goes to the Dora Palaga. And it's important to know, because a lot of people think that it all started much later. But at the end of the days, I know again, and I said that, I apologized last class, people who are very touchy when you say the word Freemasons. That's the original Freemasons. And a lot of people think now it's a great group of great men who are meeting to do good to the world. I told you already that's the front line. But the root of the Freemasons, of Bonim HaChofshim, goes all the way back to the time of the dispersion, the generation of dispersion. And we see here that Balak and Bilam are rooted there too. And what does it say? All this generation of Bavel, of the generation, Shoresh Kulamu Miklipat Amalek. They're all rooted from the Klippa of Amalek. So really the problem that we have is with Amalek. And here he says here in a side note, we know that these sparks shel keri shel Adam HaRishon, from the sperm or the seed, sperm I think is the better word, that came out of Adam HaRishon, Adam, sheyatz'u mimeno, that came out of him, b'mea v'shloshim shanim, the first 130 years. Adam HaRishon wasn't with Chava. I mean, some people know her as Eve, but her name was Chaya, not Chava. It says in the Torah, she was Em Kol Chai, the mother of all living creatures. And then when she sinned, the Yud, the Nachash, the serpent, took the Yud and pulled it down into the depth, to the impurity, so the Yud became a Vav. So instead of Chaya, her name changed into Chava. Besides that when Adam HaRishon divorced her, then the snake came to Chava, and he told her, nice to meet you, I'm John. No, he told her, my name is Chivya, because in Aramaic, Nachash is Chivya. So he told her, I'm Chivya, you should be now my wife, because your husband divorced you, and since my name is Chivya, your name should be Chava. So her name was changed to Chava. In English they call her Eve, I don't know why, where they got that, maybe Hallmark, but her name is Chaya. Later on it was changed to Chava, but Adam HaRishon wasn't with her for 130 years, and through that time, the sparks that came out of his sperm, that's what it says, Hem ba'u begilgul bedor hamabul. All these sparks, I mean, he created souls that didn't come into bodies. And I'm going to say now that as a side note, because a lot of them went into other entities and created these demons and spirits and these civilizations that live under the ground. Because Adam HaRishon, he was kicked out of Gan Eden. You have to read the text. The text says it very clearly. That gurash mi Gan Eden, he got kicked out of Gan Eden, vena venad ba'aretz. And he was wandering around in which level? In the level that is called Aretz. We're called Tevel, we're not called Aretz. And he went all the way down to the 7th layer inside the planet, where he mated there with demons and spirits and so forth, and then he did Shuvah, he was elevated to the next level and so forth, but that will keep to another series of classes. But through 130 years, Adam HaRishon was mating. Even Rashi, not to have to go to the Zohar or some book of Kabbalah. Rashi says that he mated with demons and spirits and so forth, and animals and so forth. So all these sparks that came out of him, through his sperm, got incarnated in the generation Bedor HaMabul, in the generation of the flood. Lehitaken, why? To reach to a rectification. Ve'alehem ne'emar, and on that generation it was says, Emchet ha'adam asher barati. Go to Parashat Noach, and Hashem says, I will destroy ha'adam asher barati. Why ha'adam? Shei anashim. Say the people. Say the generation. Why ha'adam? So Hashem says, I will destroy ha'adam, which is referring to Adam, asher barat, which I destroyed, that I created. So it had to be some type of a tikkun here. What is this? What is it referring to? Shehem nitzotzon shel Adam harishon. The sparks that came out of Adam harishon. Shehu nivra al yedei HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'atzmo. Who's the person that Hashem created? Ha'adam asher barati? Adam harishon. So Hashem says, I have to destroy now the sparks that you created. Not Adam himself, but the sparks. Ve'achar kach, but the problem is nobody did tshuva. Noach stood there for 120 years with a great campaign. He had a very busy Facebook page. He had a YouTube channel with thousands of followers. Nothing helped. Nobody did tshuva. And they all were destroyed, right? Ve'achar kach hem atzmam chazru. So all this generation that were incarnated in that generation, chazru begilgul, nitgalgelu, isn't it? We just learned now Shara Gilgulim, the gates of reincarnation. All these souls got incarnated, and it's using the word nitgalgelu, rolled over to which generation? Dora Falaga, the generation after the flood. So really, it's an incarnation of the previous generation who really came out of Adam HaRishon. V'achar kach, later on, so we have first generation is the sparks that came out of the sperm of Adam HaRishon. They came in an incarnation in a Gilgul to the generation of the flood. That didn't work. They came into another generation of the dispersion. That didn't work. They came again, Nidgalgelu be'Israel. They are incarnated in the nation of Israel. Shayu begalut Mitzrayim, that they were in exile in Mitzrayim. So all the souls that got incarnated and lived during the time of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, they're all from the first generation of Adam HaRishon. And why? Why did they have to come down to Mitzrayim? Ve'atam, tam means what's the reason? Ki bechet Adam HaRishon, in the sin of Adam HaRishon, nitarev tov bera. The good and the bad got mixed together. Which means, this is very significant, which means that before the sin, there was the existence of good and the existence of bad. Right? Which means that Hashem already created the world, I don't know if to say half-half, but partial good, partial bad. Now why would Hashem wouldn't create a partial of it bad? Just create the whole thing good. Well, what's the point? So Shlomo HaMelech says, Ze l'umat ze bara Elokim. Kadosh Baruch Hu created everything with a polarity, with an opposition. So Hashem has, hey, you want it to be fair? Hashem is doing everything with righteousness, and has to be, same thing as good, has to be bad. But it was separated, so you would know clearly what's bad. Right? What do you think? When Mashiach is going to come, there's not going to be bad. But there's going to be a big sign. This is bad, don't touch it. You know, the joke here, just the other day I had some encounter. The joke here is that if you see on a certain product an expiration date, you throw it, right? Well, do you really believe them that that's the expiration date? So it was on the shelf for 5 years. But a day later, that's it, it's expiration, throw it. I'm saying I had an encounter, somebody threw something. I said, why are you throwing it? No, the expiration date. Why do you believe in this nonsense? If it was completely rotten, I would tell you, okay, I don't think it's really good to eat. But it's been on the shelf for 5 years. I don't think 5 years in a week will make a difference. But that's where you see that people follow the warning on things that are irrelevant. Why don't you follow the warning on the real things? So Hashem says, I created good and I created bad. You know, that's where you see the sheker, the deception in the world, that you go to a supermarket and you see orange juice, all natural. Really? All natural. So it's sitting on the shelf for 3 months and it's all natural. Wow. No sugars added. Huh. And people fall for that. No sugar added. Okay, it's sweet like hell, but no sugar there. Somehow it's sweet. Low fat. All this junk. Diet Coke. All this nonsense. But anyways, why am I saying all this? Because Hashem created good, and there was a sign on it. Good. And there was created bad, and it says bad. Don't touch. Like you go to a electricity closet. It says high voltage. Don't touch. So you don't touch. Right? Warning, there's a dog. Sometimes you have a warning on the house, there's a dog. There's not even a dog there, but there's a warning. You know, we once lived there was cameras everywhere, and somebody once told me, can I get the footage because there was a burglary? Oh, those cameras don't work. It's like dummies. It's just, you know, the burglar sees cameras. Oh, I'm not going in there. So, let's go back to our topic. So Hashem created the world with good and created the world with bad. After the sin of Adam HaRishon, the good and the bad got mixed together. And now, up until now, we're battling it and we're suffering for it. So let's go back. Ve'atam, the reason that the souls of Israel had to go to Mitzrayim, ki bechet Adam HaRishon itarev tov bera. Because in the sin of Adam HaRishon, the good got mixed with the bad. Ubifrat, and especially, nidgalgelu kama pe'amim, they got incarnated over and over and over a few times, ad asher nifredu mehem kol hasigim bagalut. They had to go into a cycle, because incarnation is not the right word. In Hebrew it says gilgul. Gilgul is a cycle. Now, you know, just to show similarity, you know, in the olden days, people would wash clothes. They would go to the river, put the clothes in a bucket or something, and turn it in, out, and rub it. But how do you wash clothes now? You cycle, right? Why is it a cycle? Why isn't it a blender that blends the clothes? Because obviously, when you go in cycles, they figured it out that it cleans the clothes the best, right? Technically, you could have thrown the clothes in a basket and shake it. And instead of saying just long cycle, short cycle, let's just blend the clothes. So, you know, you have to sometimes look what the world offers and says, if the washing machines are going in cycles, is to come and tell you when something goes in cycles and meets, you know, friction with the metal and water with it, then all the junk comes out, all the dirt goes out. Try to wash something with your hand, but it doesn't really work well. Same thing here. So the word that we're using is lehid galgel. Gilgul means a cycle, or a roly-poly, or to roll over. Somersault. Incarnation is not really the right term. But it says here, nidgalgelu kama vekama pe'amim. They had to roll over a few times. Why? Wait a minute. Nidgalgelu kama pe'amim. They had to roll over a few times. Ad asher nifredu mehem kol hasigim. Till the junk got separated off the spark. When? Begalut Mitzrayim. How did that happen? In the exile of Mitzrayim, because they worked in slavery. Ba'avodat parech. The hard work. It's kind of like how I'm imagining it. The gilgulim, the cycles that had to go from one body to another body. But if you ever look, when I was a kid, I used to sit next to the washing machine and look at the window, and especially if I would put, like, I had a doll when I was a kid. Not a doll, like a stuffed animal. He was my best friend. He was a rabbit. I don't know why a rabbit, but he was cute, and he was my buddy. I walked with him everywhere. So one time he was very dirty. My mom put him in the washing machine, and I was an hour and a half looking how he's turning around, how he's wet. Suddenly I would see a leg, and then would turn around and I see an ear. So as a kid I didn't understand, but now I see the friction with the drum, the washing machine, I think it's called the drum. The friction of the clothes with the drum, it takes out all the dirt. It's kind of like the same idea what they used to do then. The sole also, when there's dirt stuck on the sole, has to get hit to get the junk out. The word that not only here, in other places used, is called sigim. Sigim is dirt. It's like, you know, when you carve something, the junk comes out, it's all on the floor, that's called sigim. So the dirt had to come out of these godly sparks, specifically in the exile of Mitzrayim, when they were working in slavery. And with this entire process, nir'ata bechinat ha'kedusha shebahem. Then after all the dirt got off, then the holy concept of these sparks were shown. And that was the nation of Israel. Vehem hayu hashishim ribon neshamot bnei Israel. So the 600,000 souls of the nation of Israel that went out of Mitzrayim were really the 600,000 sparks came out of Adam HaRishon at the time of the sin. And if you want a reference for that, what we learned now is a short cover on it, but he sends you to the reference, Shara Kavanot. Remember, we just learned about Shara Gilgulim. There are 8 gates. So he's sending you to the reference, Shara Kavanot, the gates of Kavanot, Drush Aleph, the first chapter, and he tells you, go and read there where the Arizal explains it in depth. Umehasigim, now what happens is that imagine a soul covered with junk from all the sins that they did in the generation of the flood and the generation of dispersion, but with all the suffering from the exile in Egypt, the junk came out, this sigim, and I think in English, I don't know if it's correct, I think the translation of sigim is slug, or maybe I'm saying it wrong, S-L-A-G, slug or slag, like the junk, right? I don't know if it's really, really good interpretation, but it's like the remaining dirt. So after,
Sludge.
a sludge. Okay. Isn't that the one who goes out of his house and that's also called a slug, no? That's a different one. The guy who goes out of like a snail. So that's a sludge?
That's sludge. The sludge is the dirt.
The dirt. Oh, good. So this is what it's referring to. So after they got cleansed in the exile of Egypt, the sludge that came out, ומהשיגים שבהם, from the dirt, יצאו נשמות הערב רב, ונדבקו בישראל. The sludge that came out of these sparks, that was the Erev Rav that got stuck to the souls of Israel. So really the Erev Rav is the junk, is the sludge. ובזה תבין, and with that you can understand, מה שכתוב לעיל, what it says above, שהערב רב הם היו דור המבול. That the Erev Rav started from the generation of the flood. And which flood? The flood of Noach. He's making sure that you know which flood, because there are other floods, but the flood of Noach, לא רצה להתפלל עליהם. You know, and Noach really didn't want to pray for that generation. It says that when it says Noach ish tzaddik haya bedorotav, and Noach was a tzaddik, when it says the word dorotav, then the commentary says, yeah, he was a tzaddik in his generation, but put him in the generation of Avraham Avinu, he would be a nothing. So I wouldn't talk bad about Noach, but you know, Avraham Avinu went and prayed on wicked people in Sodom that he didn't even know. Moshe Rabbeinu went and prayed on the Erev Rav. Noach didn't want to pray. He's like, no, these are all hoodlums. I'm not going to waste my time on these guys. So Noach didn't want to pray on them. And he said, what did Noach said? Ve'ilun inun deishtaru mi'ilen. These souls that later on came in the generation of the dispersion, hem shenisharu ma'neshamot shel dor hamabul. Whatever came in the generation after is the junk that was remaining from the generation of the flood. De'it marbahon, as it says on these souls, va'imach et kol hayekum. The Kadosh Baruch Hu destroyed all the creation. Nothing was left after the flood. Not only that, that's important to know. Maybe we should do a class about that too, because a lot of people, and it's all interconnected, because the generation of the dispersion they went and fought the master of the universe. They're all incarnated in our generation, in the people who are going against the master of the universe, and going and saying that the world is 3 billion years old, and that we came from monkeys and all that stuff. That's the same generation, and it's really parallel to what was going on there. But what's interesting then, in these theories, Darwin theory and everything else in evolution, is that according to them, the world exists for billions of years. And they have all the proofs to show you. Here's a rock. And this rock is 15 billion years old. Really? It looks like from Amazon, 15 billion years old. How do you come up with that? But the point is that with the flood, that's one thing that is important to know, because there's a big question: how do we know that the world is really only 5,780 years? Maybe it's more. But of course we go by the Torah, but at the time of the flood, having the entire planet under water, boiling hot water for an entire year, it completely changed the entire topography of the world. So even when people find all sorts of fossils and things like that, doesn't mean it's 3 billion years. It just means that at the time that everything was underwater for so long, the topography of the world changed and the materials changed and everything may be old. And then that gives you a good explanation. There's a big argument in the Torah. If there were dinosaurs, there are dinosaurs, why they're finding these fossils and so forth. But the point is that the year of the flood changed the world completely. Nothing, no living organism survived besides what was on the ark. And according to some commentaries, Ogu Melech HaBashan survived and a few others. But nevertheless, let's go back. It says that Hashem says, "Vayimach et kol hayekum," the Kadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the entire creation. Ki al yedei shenitgelgelu hanitzotzot shel Adam harishon bedor hamabul, by the fact that the sparks of Adam harishon got incarnated into the generation of the flood, venimachu b'mabul, and they were destroyed in the mabul, in the flood. Al yedei ze nidbareru v'nizdakchu k'tzat. They were able to be cleansed and cleaned a little bit. So the junk from these sparks from Adam HaRishon with the flood, only the first layer of the sludge went off. Only the first layer of the dirt. So Hashem had to destroy them completely. But the holy part of it that stayed, came again in the generation of the dispersion. Why? To be cleansed even more, to be purified even more. Umi'ilen, and from that, Erev Rav shenit'arbevu b'Yisrael, shorsham miklipat Amalek. What was left, the sludge, this junk, that got mixed. That's the Erev Rav that got mixed with the souls of Israel, that the root is coming from klipat Amalek. And if you remember, I told you that Klipat Amalek has to be destroyed. There's no hope for Amalek. He has to be destroyed. Macho emche et zecher Amalek. He's using the same root. Here the text is Vayimach et hayekum. It's the same root of emche et Amalek. Limchot et Amalek. It's to destroy it completely. Deishtaru minhon begaluta revi'a'a. Now what happens is that this remaining of Amalek still exists and remaining in the fourth galut, the fourth exile, Shehu Galut Edom. This is the exile that is called Edom. This is the exile that we're in. There are 4 exiles. If you remember, I gave a class on it in length, explaining about the 4 exiles, and especially where we find them in the book of Bereshit, where it says, Ve'ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Then we have the 4, it says, Ve'choshech al pnei tehom. I gave a whole class about that. You can find it online, where I explained the 4 exiles, and the last exile is called Galut Edom, and here he's saying that all the junk of Amalek is still stuck to us from then, and is existing in the 4th exile. Inun reshin beyekuma sagi. These are the heads of everything in the world. Governors, presidents, prime ministers, kings and queens, and so forth. Let's read it again. I'll go backwards a little bit. The junk that was remaining from Amalek, that got stuck to us then, is survived up until now in the 4th exiles. And who are these Amalek? Inun reshin bekiyom asage. All the heads of everything is this klipat Amalek. And he gives us more of a breakdown. Harashim hamitmanim al yadei tzibur, the heads that are being appointed by the people. Verodim bahem, and these heads, I mean, he's calling it head, can be a president, can be a governor, can be a prime minister, can be it, but we vote for them. Verodim bahem baparech, and they turn against them and use them against them, and they control them. Vekiyumam umemshaltam ubechozek gadol, and their existence and their memshala, their govern, how they govern the world, bechozek gadol, with great strength. Ve'inun kaimin al Israel klei Hamas, and they're controlling the nation of Israel. How? Al yedei klei Hamas, with klei Hamas is weapons. Unbelievable. Vehainu Here he says something interesting, because if you remember at the time of the generation of the flood, it says that there was a lot of Hamas. Now Hamas is not the terror organization in Gaza. Hamas means robbery, stealing. That there was a lot of stealing at the time. And here he says, when they're controlling the nation of Israel with Klei Hamas, Hainu shechomsim et mamonam, that they steal their wealth. Hitler, Yimach Shimo v'zichro, was Zera Amalek, came directly from Amalek. One of the things besides killing, they robbed everything. Property, gold, money, everything. Unbelievable. Ve'alayhu itmar, and on them it says, on this generation of the flood, Ki mal'a ha'aretz chamas mipneihem. On that generation of the flood, it says that the land increased with robbery and gezel and theft and so forth. Ve'shorish nishmatam midor hamabul, and the root of the souls of these Amalekim, it's at the time of the flood. Shelo nizdakechu, that they weren't cleansed and purified. Ve'nesa ha'erev rav, and they became this great mixed multitude, mixture of multitude, Erev Rav. Ve'lachem einam manhigim et Yisrael berachamim, and therefore they do not. The word is using manhigim. If a prime minister in Israel is a leader, it's called a manhig. How is he? What's his verb? Controlling? It's not controlling. Directing, governing. In Hebrew it says manhigim. Manhig is a leader. Right now we have a lot of leaders in Israel. And if a prime minister is a leader, it's called a manhig, who manhig et ha'am. He governs them, he controls them. But here he says, Einam manhigim et Yisrael berachamim. It's not done with love. It's not done with kindness. It's not done with mercy. Ilun inun Amalekim. These are the Amalekim. Min harishon. This is the first of all 5 Erev Rav, and there are the strong ones, they are Amalekim. But what is he telling you there in other words? These are the rulers, the leaders of Israel. These are Amalekim. That's why they come out with all these laws. If you put tefillin on, half a year imprisonment. You have to marry gay couples. We have to do a gay pride in Yerushalayim. And to walk with the flag of Israel in Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to. A young girl was assaulted and arrested for walking with a flag. And don't take my words out of context. The flag that they're going here in Israel, that's an evil flag. Has nothing to do with Judaism, by the way. The white flag and the Magen David, it's not even the Magen David, it's actually the wrong term to say, the Star of David. It's not the Star of David, by the way. Maybe we have to go to do a lot of classes about that. That's the flag that we have of Medinat Israel. That's an evil flag. It even has hypnotic powers in it, that if you notice that every time that a president, a prime minister, a general, they're all talking, there's always the Israeli flag in the back. Why? Because it has hypnotic powers, because they're using the triangles upside down. It's not the right way. This is not a holy symbol, by the way. It was holy at one time, it got misused, and now they're telling everybody the Star of David, the Star of David. It's not true, that wasn't his star. It was completely different. The Star of David has 5 tzlaot, how do you call them, angles, not 6. But the point is, that I'm just throwing it out there as a bomb. We'll have to maybe do some class about that. But when the Zionism, which is 100% Amalek, by the way, don't mix it. People will get very offended because they say, I'm Zionist. No, you're not. You love Israel. You are pro-Israel. You are a patriot. Don't call yourself a Zionist, because Zionism is saying and declaring, I'm against God. I'm going to uproot the Torah. That's the movement of Zionism. They took the holy word. No, Zion is one of the names of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim has 7 names. One of them is called Zion. Uveshuvcha leZion berachamim. They took this holy word and they distorted it. Everything that has to do with Amalek, you'll find 3 letters, Yud Vav Nun, in them. And Yud Vav Nun is Yavan. Yavan is Greece. This is the Klippa of Yavan. Everything that you'll find Amalek in it, you'll find the letters Yud Vav Nun in it. And one of them is Zion. Right? So every word that you find, even like, there's something, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. There's something that is called Tarbut Yavan. the culture of Greece. That's the culture that Antiochus came to oppose on us, to destroy us. He didn't tell you, Antiochus says, I'm not killing you. I want you lihit yaven. I want you to become like us. I don't want you to do circumcision. I don't want you to celebrate the month, the rejuvenation of the month. I don't want you to do all the Shabbat. You can be regular people. You can go and learn your Torah. It's a wisdom. It's like we have our wisdom. But the tarbut, the culture of Yavan, if you remember, I gave a long class about it. I'm not going to sidetrack on that. You can find the class when I was talking about Chanukah, but it's called Tarbut Yavan, the culture of Yavan. It came from the 3 cities of Yavan. One of them was Sparta, the concept of sport, idolizing the body, and so forth. But go and look at that video. It's very, very powerful. It has to do with Chanukah, but it also gives you the idea of the culture of Yavan. And the Tzionim, which of course has the Yud Vav Nun in them, which I gave another class about that. You can find them all in the series of Chanukah. Why it's a small Yud, a middle Vav, and a long Nun. It's these lines that are going down. The Yud of Hashem, what they do is they pull it down to the Klippah, so the Yud becomes a Nun, a very underneath the surface. But you'll find everything with the Yud and Vav and Nun in it. Why? Because the Amalek, we're going to see now how the Erev Rav, not all of them want to destroy us. Some of them, like Haman, wanted to destroy us. Haman was Zera Amalek. Zera means the offspring, a descendants. Hitler was Zera Amalek. But a lot of these rulers, they don't want to kill us. They just want us to leshakach Toratcha, to completely destroy the Torah. That's what's going on now in Eretz Israel, right? The regime, the government, the Zionism. That's not what people think. I'm Zionist. No, you're not. You're patriarch. You love Israel. Don't mix these two terms. And they did it in such a professional way that people think that Zionism is pro-Israel. Zionism is, in other words, erase the Torah. We do not want the Torah. You know what David Ben-Gurion says? You have to read all the memoirs of all these leaders, Ben-Gurion and Jabotinsky and Herzl. Everybody thinks they're so pro-Torah. They are against the Torah. Ben-Gurion said when he became prime minister, within a few years, Orthodox Jews are only going to be found in a museum. Their plan was to bring the whoever was remaining to this land and to completely obliterate the Torah. No Torah, we don't want Torah here. So when the Sephardi's Jews came in the 50s, they cut their peot, took their yarmulkes off, threw them into schools, of course taught them all the junk that they're teaching, but they didn't want to have anything to do with Torah here. Now, how would you fool the Jews to come here? Then you have to give everything Torah symbols. And if it has Torah symbols, then it will look very convincing. So all the songs of the Zionisms are all psukim from Tehillim, by the way. Right? They're all Tehillim. So, oh, wow, we're singing Tehillim. But they're cut with not the whole pasuk. And not only that, so they say, okay, how are we going to make our flag? Let's make our flag look like a talit. And if you turn the flag upside down, it looks like the stripes of the talit. And let's put a Jewish symbol on it. But most people don't know about it. I think we should make a few classes about that, because there were great rabbis that were very against the Star of David. And one of them was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, by the way. He never agreed ever to have the Star of David anywhere that has to do with Chabad. And not all the Chabad people know that even. You know that there's a story that the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself came to one of the summer camps of the girls in the upstate New York, and there was a Star of David in the entrance of the camp, and he told his secretary, remove this before I'm coming in. Remove the star. And the only time he allowed to have a star was on the floor in the Bet Knesset in Brooklyn, where he would step on it. And even most of the Lubavitchers don't even know about that. And you have it on all the synagogues, Star of David everywhere. And it's not only the Lubavitcher Rebbe, there are many other great rabbis that were very against it. We don't want this symbol here. Everybody has it, thinking that that's a holy symbol. It was a holy symbol. I have to teach you the whole history, because a lot of people pull it from different books, that you see the symbol, books of Kabbalah, it was misused, and it lost its kedusha. But to make a long story short, we're totally sidetracking, but it's extremely important that we know who we're dealing with. Because everything in Israel is Tarbut Yavan. To bring us to idolize our body, sports, and they brought to Israel malls. We never had malls. When I grew up, we didn't have malls. And a mall in Hebrew is kenyon. And what do you find in the word kinyon? Yud Vav Nun. Is the culture that we're going and shopping and I'm spending all my money on how I look and I have to have name tags, not name tags, how do you call it, like brands and all that. That's not a Jewish culture. That's a Greek culture. To be dressed beautiful. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being dressed nice, but not to pay 1,000 shekel for a t-shirt that costs $1 to create, but it has a symbol on it. That's Tarbut Yavan. That's the culture of Greece. No God. No foundation of the Torah. And the entire, I don't want to say Jewish, but the entire Zionist movement in Israel is to uproot the Torah. No Torah. We don't want you to learn Torah. I grew up in Israel. I know how it is. In the public schools, they taught us that the Torah is a hoax. That it's not even a correct history. And it's all customs and it's all fairy tales. But that's the plan of the Zionism. And a lot of people, when I'm talking about that, they say, I'm Zionist. I love Israel. I love Israel too, but you love the land of Israel. You love Eretz Israel. You love the nation of Israel. The government? This evil regime? Bnei Amalek? It says here clearly that all the government was going to be Amalek. Now, it doesn't mean that Bibi Bennett and all these other clowns are actually Zera Amalek. But there's no question that their soul is trapped by the Erev Rav. And they're acting on behalf of them, either for greed of money or jealousy. And look now at Bennett. I don't want to get into politics right now. He wasn't even elected. It's like a Biden. He has 6 mandatim. How can he become a prime minister? Raklo Bibi. Not that I'm a great fan of Bibi, but everything against Bibi. I mean, the whole thing that you're looking at the politics in Israel, what's going on here? Forget about the fact now that the entire government of Israel is managed and run by a deep state coming out from outside of Israel. But, and it's all connected to what we're learning now because we're learning about the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav is against Hashem. Anything against Hashem. How come, with everything that you see now, the police is brutal and aggressive and violent against the religious people? But when it comes to Arabs, when we had now the riots, did you see the police doing anything? No. But when a few Orthodox guys go out to the street and they demonstrate quietly, they get beaten up, they get attacked. The whole time of the corona, all the synagogues were attacked. Not other people. People in Tel Aviv were walking freely. So you see the regime in Israel, in the country, in the government, it's all against the Torah. And now a lot of people say, what are you talking about? We have religious parties in the Knesset. Well, I'm not going to say too much. But the fact that a person is wearing a beard, that doesn't mean he's religious. And the fact that a person has a yarmulke or whatever, it doesn't mean anything. And a beard takes a year to grow. Because a person is dressed with a yarmulke and a black suit, it means that he's observant. Torah has nothing to do with politics. So a lot of people say, but we need the power in the government. You don't need nothing. It's corruption. It's money and control. I'm not going to talk too much. People get very, very offended. But I can tell you that to be in the government, you have to be corrupt. And it doesn't work together. You cannot be a rabbi and in the government. It doesn't work together. When Mashiach is going to come, we're going to have a Knesset Israel. We're going to have a Sanhedrin. This is not going to be mixed with Arabs and women and balagan and lying. And not that I have anything else. It has nothing to do with women. I'm just saying Sanhedrin is only men. What we want to take from this, because we're definitely not going to go through the 5 groups today, we're just going to have to conclude with the Amalek, but I'm going to read again what it says here. Ve'inun kaimin al Israel kli Hamas, and they're controlling the nation of Israel with his weapons and or taking their money. Ve'alayu hitmarkim al haaretz Hamas mipneihem, and it says on them that the entire land was increasing in robbery and theft. And what do you think now the government officials are doing? Not only in Israel, everywhere. They're all sitting on millions. Where do you have millions of dollars from? Because they're stealing it from somewhere. That's exactly what Hamas means to steal. Look at Ehud Barak. And a lot of people will say, Lashon hara, not Lashon hara, it's not Lashon hara. Ehud Barak was the chief of staff of Israel, right? So it means that from the age of 18, he was a soldier. How much does a soldier earn in the army for 40 years? And then he became an MK, and then he became a prime minister. Forget about it that he's best friends with Epstein and all this, the rest of the junk. I say no more. But you know how many property the guy has in Tel Aviv? The guy's like a millionaire. Where do you have so much money from? No, that's my business. Go do whatever you want. No, so they say he went and gave some lectures around the world. Okay, so you gave some lectures. So you made $100,000. You made $500,000. How do you own dozens of properties in Tel Aviv? Houses that are worth millions of dollars, unless you stole the money somehow. When you have control, when you're the chief of staff in the army. I was in the Israeli army. You know what I saw? And it's not about bad-mouthing anybody, and I'm not judging anybody. But when we were in Lebanon, we would be transferred from Israel into Lebanon, right? Because we had to guard there. So you know what an open border it was? You know how much drugs came through the borders? And who do you think are the big drug dealers? All the generals and the colonels, because you have immunity. Just throw it in the jeep and you... I saw things with my own eyes. Don't you think we did that as soldiers? Smuggling cigarettes? Of course, if we would get caught, you go to jail. We would smuggle cigarettes and all sorts of other things. But there are some times we would see undercover cars going in the border. Of course, we would be told this is special units. Special units. It's a general putting in some cars, putting there 100 kilos of cocaine through the border. You have immunity from the army. Now, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I saw with my own eyes a lot of things because the border is open. You do whatever you want. When you have power, when you have control, you do almost whatever you want. So when it says here that the Erev Rav, they would steal from the people, don't you think the government is stealing from us? They're stealing from us in a legal way. They're calling it taxes or fines or all sorts of other things. I have a friend now who wants to come to Israel. He says, I don't want to come to Israel. They're forcing me to take 3 corona tests, and it's going to cost me $250. I have to pay for that. I have to pay for that. I don't want to be tested 3 times and blood taken from me. It's like a scam. It's a scam to make money. Oh, it's unheard of to pay $180 for a test. Then it'll cost 2 shekels. What are you testing? Why $180? Anyways, there's a lot more what to say. Let's continue. And then he says, the Amalek, the root of their soul comes from the generation of the flood, and they weren't cleansed or clean, and they became an Erev Rav. And therefore they're controlling Israel, being vicious and brutal. No mercy. I don't see any mercy coming from our government. Ilen inun Amalekim. These are the Amalekim for you. This is the first, he calls it mean, the species, the first species of the Erev Rav, Amalekim. The vicious ones, the dangerous ones. And these are the ones who are controlling us right now. Now, if they're controlling the land of Israel, they're controlling everything, by the way. Because the land of Israel is controlled not by the Israeli government. These are all puppets. And even a lot of them could be that they're good people. They might be do tshuva. Half of them are not even Jewish, by the way. I'm not talking only about the Arabs, even the ones who pretend to be Jewish. You know, one of the greatest leaders in Israel's history, who was a general, who was a prime minister, Ariel Sharon, he's not even Jewish. His mother's like a Polish immigrant that came to Israel. His father was Jewish. His mother wasn't even Jewish. He was a prime minister of Israel. So half of the people who are sitting in the Knesset are not even Jewish. Not only in the Knesset, in many other things. Here it's talking about the manhigim. The manhigim, the rulers, can be not only in the Knesset, can be the CEOs of all big banks and big companies, and the mishmash that we have here. Forget about how they're bringing into Israel now. China owns a few of the biggest companies in Israel. Tnuva, the biggest company for dairy products in Israel, was bought by the Chinese. Why is selling our company to the Chinese? They sold to the Chinese 1,000,000 dunam. Dunam is 1/4 of an acre. 1,000,000 dunam in the Negev is sold to the Chinese. Why is selling our land to the Chinese? The port in Haifa was sold to a Chinese company. My port, where I pay taxes for every little thing that I buy, I pay meches. Did you notice that? How much taxes you pay on meches? And who's it going to fund the Chinese to control my products? I mean, the whole thing that's going here is a scam. But I know I get all hyper now and excited by all this, but it can drive you nuts. But I tell you what can drive you nuts, the fact that people are so gullible and naive and say, why are you talking like that? Bibi is a great guy. He fought for Israel. Okay, so he fought for Israel. Doesn't mean he didn't turn, the Torah says, the money will blind the eyes of righteous people. Nobody goes to politics because for their love of, like Bennett says, I love the people, I serve the people. Shakran, liar. You don't serve anybody. You serve your own ego and your own pocket. So we see here clearly the Erev Rav is controlling. And again, just to make something clear, it doesn't mean that a lot of them are a neshama of Erev Rav, a soul of Erev Rav, but definitely is trapped by the klipa and controlled, manipulated, sometimes threatened, sometimes hypnotized to follow orders and so forth. And when I'm saying, I'm constantly saying Israel, but you know, one of the main reasons that Israel is the focus of the mess, because Israel is the center of the world. And if we're having problems in Israel, it's rippling to the entire world. Not for nothing, this little country that technically should be left alone, we are like in the headlines of the entire world. We are the thorn in the eyes of the world. Why? Because from here, everything goes out from here. So when it comes to the Erev Rav, here it's talking that it's controlling Israel. It's controlling everything. And we're going to continue with the rest of the 5 groups. I told you, Nephilim, Giborim, Anakim, Refim, and Amalekim. Now we just explained about the Amalek. Sorry that it went too long. We're going to have to do another class tomorrow about the rest. I don't know, we read a few lines here. It took us an hour and a half. But I told you, this might turn into a book. But the point that we want to at least to conclude from now is first we know where they're rooted from. Then we know that these are, and this is an important thing, Inun Reshin Bekiyuma Sage. These are the heads of everything that have been appointed by the people. And not only in Israel, everywhere. The joke is that the people think they vote for them. Probably almost any election, now you saw it with your own eyes, that the elections are rigged. All the elections are rigged. Because it's all one big show. One time the Republicans take it, one time the Democrats take it, one time they take it. Same thing in Israel, same junk. You know, they say in Hebrew, same ladies, different dress. Yota giveret b'shinui aderet. I say junk, different day. But the point that we want to take from that this Erev Rav, this part of Amalek, are the rulers, and I don't know if I'm using the right word, because in Hebrew it says manhigim. Manhig is like a ruler, a president, a prime minister, a king, a chief of staff, generals, CEOs, presidents, and so forth. Excuse me? Well, high-ranking managers. Like if you're looking in the army, then it won't necessarily be colonels, it will be generals and up. If it's going to be in companies, CEOs of Chevrat Chashmal, the energy company in Israel. The biggest corruption. I don't even know how people fall for that. They're putting all these chimneys all over Israel, saying it's a power plant. They're not doing any electricity there. They're not doing nothing. They're doing pollution there and stealing our money. So, because they're not producing electricity in these power plants. The electricity is produced in many other different ways. Now they're trying to do solar panels. But Telsa clearly showed how you make electricity from air. Why do you need all these power plants? It's to pretend that they're doing electricity so they can rob us from our money every month with the electricity bill. And if you chas v'shalom don't pay electricity bill, boom, you're in darkness. And you come up with the chutzpah to put me in darkness. How about you overcharge me hundreds of shekels every month for electricity that you don't even create? You understand the hoax? And then you see the pollution. You know what pollution these power plants are doing? And of course, many people will roll their eyes. What are you talking about? But that's the truth. Very soon the truth is all going to be served to you on a silver platter. Better to start chewing it right now, where you're going to start figuring out that everything is a hoax. Pay for electricity. And even if I should pay for some service, 30 shekels. Sometimes people pay 3,000, 4,000 shekels electricity bills. For what? For a few light bulbs? What am I running here? A factory? Where are you coming up with all these kilowatts? Biggest fraud ever. So why am I saying that? Because a CEO of a company like that, that's also an Erev Rav. They don't know what's going on there, what they're not walking. Try to go for a siyur, to a route in one of the power plants. They're not going to let you in. It's guarded with gates, with barbed wire fences and patrol. Why? Why are you guarding the power plants like it's a secret military base? Because there's nothing really there. And you don't want me to come in and see that really you're not doing nothing there. just pollution. And that's one example out of many, by the way. Almost everything is a hoax. Communication companies, and so all the heads of everything, that's part of the Erev Rav. Somebody sent me a documentary about some big companies in Israel, some corruption of a few, billionaires in Israel, and how they own all the banks and they own the newspapers and you see the documentary is done so smart, and you see how it's all a game. How they appoint in all the right offices, the right people, so they're protected from anywhere, and this bank gives them this loan, and you're talking about loans, about billions of shekels of loans, because the head of this bank is a friend of this, and it's all one big show. And who's the one who's paying it? We. When we're being slaughtered with taxes and electricity bills and water bill and gas bill and arnona, and this hoax arnona. What are you doing? You're taking out the garbage? For that I'm paying you 3,000 shekels. What are you doing here? Building a kikar? You know how much money the arnona brings into the city? Why do you need all this money? Where is this money? I don't see anything going on in the city. So to say, city taxes. I don't see anything. Do you see anything going on here? Besides some flowers in one of the merry-go-rounds there? Are you buying flowers for 1,000 shekels? That's it? You shut my mouth and you're taking the garbage out once a week? I don't see any culture going on here. I don't see any activities to the kids. I don't see anything. Do you see any public shelters here? Take this money, build public shelters. Do you have a shelter in your home? No. This is the whole city. Nobody has shelters here. What if there's going to be a bombing here? Do you have where to run to? Take the money of the arnona and build shelters. I want to see you building bomb shelters. Are you building me a kikar with a fountain of water? What are you fooling? Make even the quick math. 60,000, 70,000 residents, times that the arnona. Where's this money? How much does a merry-go-round like this cost? I mean, I know people don't understand what I'm talking about. The Tzfat residents, now every circle, they may make flowers and a fountain. Wow! The city of fountains now, everything is fountains. How much does the fountain cost? 1,000 shekels, 10,000 shekels? Show me what you're doing with the money. It's all records you can't even see. Where is it going to? Education? No, it's not. The education is coming from the government. It's going for roads? No, it's not. The road is coming from the government. So what are you doing with my money? And if chas v'shalom I don't pay it, right away they seize the account. One time I didn't get the bill in the mail. They didn't charge my card because it was declined or something. They seized my bank account. What are you talking about? I pay like a good boy every month. Once time the credit card didn't work and you seized my bank account. And the chutzpah is, I mean, the way how everything is run and managed. How is he saying here? Where was it? Einam manhigim et Yisrael berachamim. No mercy here. Strong hand like this. What is this? Stalin? And the sad part is that people fall for all this. They love the government, love the officials. Oh, Bibi! Maybe deep down inside he's a good guy. I don't know. Definitely controlled by the evil regime. Maybe blamed, maybe forced, maybe threatened. I don't know. Hypnotized. But the point is that we have Amalek, this Zera Amalek that now as the generation goes, Haman was tough hand, kill everybody, Hitler. Now it's always smiles. Tov. So just to conclude, so the first species, the first type, the first group of the Erev Rav is the Amalekim, that we see where the root comes from the semen, the seed that came out of Adam HaRishon in a form of impurity, not purity, got mixed with the good, had to go through the generation of the flood to get the first rinse, generation of the dispersion, second rinse, generation of Egypt, third rinse. The Kedusha went out into the 600,000 souls, but was left with a lot of junk, and that junk got attached to the nation of Israel. They went out with Mitzrayim with them. Ve'erev Rav alu imahem. And this mixed multitude of the great mixed multitude came out with them, and for that came all the problems. But don't think that's where it started. As it says clearly here, it started at the time of the generation of dispersion, which after we finish the 7-month course about the Erev Rav, will connect the generation of dispersion, how they come into effect. And needless to say, It says here clearly that they survived all exiles. Amalek was never destroyed. And now we find Amalek now in all the key positions all around the world. And you have to remember, because the other Erev Rav that we're going to talk about, it's not politicians. It's other things that we're going to have to learn tomorrow, and maybe Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday of next week, and Monday, Tuesday. But here is some of the leaders of the world. And I'm just going to say that as a side note, even though a lot of people might get upset of that, even in the religious leaders world, there's a lot of Erev Rav. Don't be fooled by beards and hats and all that. I know a lot of people don't like hearing that, but the hand of the Erev Rav is everywhere. It's in show business, it's in governments, it's in high tech, it's everywhere. And of course, it's in the Torah world. So we're going to read soon the rest of the Erev Rav, that even in the Torah world, the leaders, many leaders are Erev Rav. And they look like scholars, but needless to say, a lot of it is fake. That we'll have to already learn. Tomorrow we'll do the Nephilim. These are the angels that came down from the sky. A lot of people like learning about them. Then we're going to have the Giborim and the Rivaim. Okay, we'll go through Refaim, we'll go through everything. I'm sure in 3 months we'll sum it up. In the meantime, we got a little bit more educated. The conclusion will come, of course, at the end. How do you deal with it? How do you recognize it? Bottom line is, what do we do with it? And the great hope of all is that Mashiach is going to come and destroy them all. And get rid of all this junk. And important to remember that a lot of it is just stuck. A lot of it could be good people, but the klipa of Amalek is stuck to them. And I'm just going to give you one last analogy, then we'll stop. Many years ago, there was a movie called Ghostbusters. And that's with Dan Aykroyd and I forgot the other guy's names. But anyways, I'm talking about the old Ghostbusters. I think it's in the second Ghostbusters, is that they hear something going on under the ground, and they go into under the ground, and they find the river of slime. Remember that scene? And then I believe it's Dan Aykroyd that falls into the river of slime, and he comes out and he starts yelling and cursing, and he's violent, and then they wash him down, and he starts hugging everybody, and I love you, and I love you. You remember that scene? No? So go to YouTube, do the river of slime, the Ghostbusters, and you'll see it. It's there. I looked it up. You gotta go to YouTube, do Ghostbusters, river of slime. But why am I saying all that? Because that's exactly a perfect example when the klipa, the slime, the sludge, get attached to Kedusha. So when he fell to the river of slime and he goes out, he's all like gooey and disgusting. He's violent. He's rude. He curses. He attacks them. Then they wash him down. They take the sludge, the goo off, and he's loving them. He hugs them and he kisses them. Perfect example when a person gets attached to the klipa, he becomes like the klipa. Violent and rude and vulgar, and with the nature of taking and stealing and stepping on. All you need to do is wash the dirt off, and suddenly you'll see Bibi's going to lead minyanim in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. You know, they're making Photoshop of all they made Bibi with peot, and but a lot of them are good souls that are stuck in the klipa. Some of them are complete Amalek. You see on the face, this is 100% Amalek, have to be shot in the head and then cut the head off. But a lot of them are good souls that are stuck into the klipa. For whatever reason, by the way, we're all stuck in klipa, by the way. Each one of us stuck somewhere else. Some in promiscuity, some in love for money and control, jealousy, hate, and so on. It's all klipa. That's why the prophet Yeshayahu says, "V'zarakti alechem mayim teorim." Hashem will pour on us, will sprinkle on us pure water. Then we're all going to wake up. No more hate, no more jealousy, no more anger. We're going to have patience to each other. We're going to respect each other. Can you imagine that day? Till then, we'll see that we're clearly stuck in the klipa. And the sad reality is that our leaders are all Amalek. They're all Erev Rav. It doesn't matter the intensity of 100%, not 100%, it's irrelevant. And then now, tomorrow and Sunday, we'll see already the rest of the Erev Rav. And at the end, of course, we can draw the conclusion and see what we're going to do with it. Mezad Hashem, till then, Hashem should have mercy on us and for the rest of the world, and hopefully Mashiach will come faster than we can think of, and kill and uproot the Zera Amalek and destroy it, and we'll see all the good things that we're going to end up seeing with the coming of Mashiach. Tov.